I didn't want to be gay because I felt like that didn't fit into the church. And so I was like, okay, I have to change my orientation so I can fit into the church.
Do you think that anger stage is sometimes where people diverge in their faith?
People who I have found are the most unkind to me are actually former members of the church who are LGBTQ. So is it unfair? 100% it's unfair. But there are a lot of things that are unfair about life, and Jesus will make them right.
Why do you choose to stay active, though? Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Saints Unscripted. Today, we are here with a very special guest, Ben Schilaty, and we're going to be talking about LGBTQ issues, learn more about the community, more about him, and I guess let's just turn it over to him right away. Like, why are you here to talk about this?
Well, I love attention, first of all. That's the main reason I'm here. But I am a gay member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I came out publicly 10 years ago when I was 30, which means I am now 40. I've been actively involved in the community ever since. And so this is kind of one of my favorite topics. And just really briefly, so I first realized I was gay when I was about 12 years old, like 11 or 12.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't a problem because I was going to go on a mission and that would fix me. And I went on a mission and came back and was still attracted to men. And that led to a number of years of me praying, fasting, going to therapy, doing everything I could to be straight, and just thinking that if I'm just faithful enough, God will change me. And that didn't happen, even though I dated women and even kissed one.
My goodness.
I know. I tried really hard to be straight and was very unsuccessful at it. And then when I was 30, I came out publicly on my blog, and that just like opened up this whole new world to me because I felt like I was the only one. Like I was the only gay member of the church. And then suddenly there was this whole group of people that I didn't know about. And many of them were suffering and struggling. And so at the time when I came out, I was living in Tucson. I was doing my PhD there. I finished my PhD. I was going to be a Spanish professor. And then I returned to school and got a master's in social work to become a therapist. So I now work primarily with the LGBTQ community, helping them resolve issues of shame, reconciling faith and sexuality. And that's what I do professionally right now. And I also am a professor at Utah Valley University.
Wow.
So that keeps me busy. But I also wrote a book that Deseret Book published called A Walk in My Shoes, Questions I'm Often Asked as a Gay Latter-day Saint, which I'm very proud of. And I host a podcast with my friend Charlie called Questions in the Closet, where we take questions that people have about being gay in the church and we discuss them with a guest. So this is like what I do. Like this is what I do with my life. So
it's everything.
Yeah. So I love talking about this, and I've just found that when people have the opportunity to learn and know better, they do better. Yeah. And there are the best of intentions in our community, like in the Latter-day Saint community. And people just often don't know what to do because they don't have all the information they need. And so I'm happy to provide as much information as I can and experiences so that people can be loving and kind and supportive of their LGBTQ loved ones.
Yeah, what you just said is exactly, I think, one reason why I'm here, the one hosting today, is because I feel like I try to have the best of intentions. I don't know as much as I should. I don't know exactly. Sometimes it's tricky to talk about this stuff because you don't know what's going to be insensitive or what's good. And maybe some of you other people listening might feel this way too. So I think that we're here to learn from you today and hopefully come out a better person.
Yeah, that's the plan.
And I also have some people in my life who are members of the LGBTQ community. And even though I love them and support them, I still also don't know exactly how to talk to them about some of these things. So another thing we'll be learning.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, so you mentioned that you're a therapist and you've spoken with probably thousands of members of the LGBTQ community. So from speaking with them, they're probably on all sorts of different paths within faith and the church, right? So I guess, do you want to just share a little bit more about what you've been able to see and how we can understand that there is this like large spectrum of paths that these people take?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
So when it comes to like the LGBTQ Latter-day Saint community, like we are 0% a monolith. Like there are so many diverse experiences and opinions. And if you like look really conservatively at the number, like percentage wise, how many Latter-day Saints are LGBTQ, like it's in the hundreds of thousands. Like we are a large portion of the church.
Wow.
And so there's just going to be so many different experiences. And I haven't had thousands of therapy clients, but I have talked to thousands of people, just in my in my work in the community. So I talk to a lot of people, and this is generally what I have found happens. And painting with a very broad brush, we often start in the stage of like, once we realize we're LGBTQ, we're like, this isn't real. This isn't happening. We live in this stage of denial. And denial honestly isn't necessarily bad. It can be a healthy coping mechanism to help us postpone dealing with something we don't want to deal with until we're ready to deal with it. Then we move from this denial phase to a phase that I would call, this is real, but I can fix it. And that's when we start to pray to change, fast to change, maybe go to therapy or do other things to try and change our orientation. And then we often move to a phase that's called, this is real, but life will be normal. And so like, I can still, like, I'm going to be, like, I'm gay, I'm attracted to men, but I can still pursue a heterosexual relationship, be married in the temple, life will be normal. Then as we try that, and that often doesn't work out, then we get to this phase of, oh, well, this is real, this is happening, but life isn't going to be normal. And what happens at that phase is there are all these feelings of internalized shame and homophobia we often experience of like, I'm bad, I'm wrong, I need to change. And then those feelings then get pointed outward. So instead of I'm bad, I'm wrong, I need to change, it's you're bad, my family is wrong, the church needs to change. And that's a very common process that people go through. Like all those internalized feelings then get pushed outward. And then people go to the stage called this is real, this is happening, and it's the most important thing that matters. Like there's this big pendulum swing of I don't want to be this to this is the only thing that matters, the thing that matters the most. And that's called the pride stage, where people are constantly talking about it, sharing about their orientation, and it's just really like heavily emphasized in their lives. And that's the stage that straight people are most likely to see because it's the most vocal, it's the most out there. And it can feel really jarring. And people who are observing that stage missed the earlier stages. And so they didn't see all that work that was happening before. And then after the pride stage, we get to this place of this is real, this is part of my life, and it's just one of the many aspects that makes up who I am. Kind of like my orientation or my gender identity is part of who I am, but it's not none of who I am. It's also not all of who I am.
Wow.
And so different people in those different stages need different things. And so someone who's in a denial stage, they need a little more exposure. They need to normalize the experience. People who are in an angry phase, they need to process that anger and work through that anger and have that anger validated. And anger is often a secondary emotion. So like what's below the anger and how can we address that? And so people need different things depending on where they're at. And people in this pride stage, they just need to be like heard and listened to, and they need people to just listen to their experiences. And so people need different things while they're on this journey. And what's really interesting is families and allies often go through similar stages of, no, this isn't real. Okay, how do we fix this? Like, okay, this is real, but like your life is going to be normal. To like, oh my gosh, how did society do this to you? That my kid is gay and that's all that matters about my kid. To like, yeah, this is one part of who they are. And so
I totally see that. Yeah.
And so it's this very normal process that we go through that can seem jarring from the outside, but it's really so common. And so when I'm working with my clients, I often, I don't know if warn is the right word, but I try and prepare them for the next stage. And like, this is likely what's going to start happening in your life. And when I work with parents and they're starting to move from this denial stage to an acceptance stage, I tell them like, you're probably going to get angry at some things in society right now. And they do. And then we work through that.
Yeah. Do you think that anger stage is sometimes like where people diverge in their faith? Is that where that you normally see that, or is that somewhere else?
You know, it can happen anywhere along the spectrum, but I think that is where it happens the most because people feel really hurt. They feel that they've experienced a lot of pain and isolation and rejection typically. And then that pain, rejection, isolation is now pointed at the church often. So it's like the church did this to me. And when you are feeling so much hurt and so much pain, and then you point that at an institution, it's really normal to just say, you know what, I'm done with this. This caused me pain. I don't want to be part of it anymore. I would say that that's a very, very common experience.
From the people who do, so they kind of get to the end of this pendulum, and then if they are still active members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, do you feel like the only path, or I guess is the only path to be an active member of the church to choose to never date anybody?
Yeah. I would never say like, well, this is the only thing to do or what the right thing is to do. I see a number of paths that people are choosing. So when I was younger, I thought that I had two options. I either stayed in the church and married a woman, or I left the church and was in a same-sex relationship with a man. And back when I was going through all this, like marriage wasn't even legal in the U.S. Because like I said, I'm 40. So, and so it was like either stay in the church, be with a woman, or leave the church and marry a man or be with a man. And both those options just seemed so terrible to me because I couldn't imagine marrying a woman. Like that just seemed so incongruent with who I was. And like, I remember kissing a girl and just feeling so awful about it. Just like, I love this person. Like we're best friends, but like kissing her just feels so gross to me. And then I also thought, well, if I pursue a relationship with a man, then I have to leave behind this gospel and these teachings that I love. And that just seems so hard as well. And so I just really felt like I was super stuck. I just had these two paths. And so for a while in my 30s, I just chose this path of I'm just going to be single. And that really felt right to me. And what I'm seeing happen now, which I didn't see happen a few years ago, is younger people saying, I am going to pursue a same-sex relationship and I'm going to remain active in the church. And that wasn't something I saw happen much before. It was either you do this or you do this. It was kind of like an all or nothing. And a lot of people are choosing more of what we might call like a middle path or a nuanced path of I'm going to participate in the church as much as I can, but I'm also going to be with someone that I love. But there are also people who are choosing to be in mixed orientation marriages, or choosing to leave the church altogether, or choosing to be single and stay in the church. So there's a whole wide spectrum of choices that people are making, and people aren't feeling as stuck and as trapped as they once did, like when I was younger. But it's still, every decision comes with a lot of loss.
Yeah.
Like there's something you have to give up with every decision. And that's just, it breaks a lot of hearts.
Yeah, I can see that.
Mm-hmm.
Just thinking about if you choose the path to just be single, but then you still get to see all these people that you're just like, well, they just get to marry whoever they love just because it's the right person. And that would be really tough. And with this path that you've chosen, when you get to see other people who just can marry someone because they're in a heterosexual relationship and stay in the church and get all the blessings that come with being a member of the church and get sealed in the temple, does that, to someone like you who chooses to be single, does that feel unfair?
That's a yes or no question. I'll answer with a story.
Yes, please.
When I was 29, this is before I'd come out publicly, I'd been dating this woman named Leanne, who is now still a good friend. And she's the last one I tried to date. And we decided to just be friends at this point. And she called me late one night just to see how I was doing. And it was right in the middle of general conference. Like I remember that. And like all these things were like spinning in my head, and just like the gospel, my orientation, like how does it all fit together? And my roommate at the time didn't know I was gay. And so when she called, I walked out of my house and walked 2 blocks down the road and sat on a dusty curb by a park in Tucson. And I just like unloaded all of my feelings onto her. And there was this guy in my ward that I had a crush on at the time. And I just like told her about him, and I said his name. And one thing straight people want to understand is when you come out and say like, I'm gay or I'm experiencing same-sex attraction, like that is vulnerable. But when there's actually a person you like and you like state that, like there's this actual person, that's an added level of vulnerability. And so when I said that, I just started to cry. It was like a lot. And I remember saying to her, it doesn't feel fair that I have to choose between being with someone that I love and being in a church that I love when other people don't have to make that choice. It really feels unfair to me. And, you know, she could have just like answered my question and been like, oh, well, it'll all work out and all that. And she didn't do that. She just like listened and just cried with me on the phone. And then as we were talking and she asked me some good questions, this line from Preach My Gospel came into my head, which is, all that is unfair about life can be made right through the atonement of Jesus Christ. And so is it unfair? 100% it's unfair. But there are a lot of things that are unfair about life, and Jesus will make them right. And so I don't know what that path for making that right looks like right now, but I do believe in that all of the unfairnesses will be made right. But yeah, it's unfair.
Yeah. How long did it take you to get to a point where you believe that statement?
I think it's one of those, like, Elder Bednar talks about Revelation being like a light switch or like a sunrise.
Yeah.
Definitely more of a sunrise experience in my life where it's like slowly I'm like, okay, I can trust, I can have faith. And because for so long I didn't want to be gay because I felt like that didn't fit into the church. And so I was like, okay, I have to change my orientation so I can fit into the church. And then I got to a place of, okay, well, I'm gay and that isn't going to change. So I either leave the church or I change it. It was like one of these two things has to change about me. And, in my 30s, and there wasn't a moment where this happened, but just realizing, okay, well, there are two things that aren't going to change about me, my orientation and my faith. Like those things are constant in my life. And I don't have all the answers, but I'm not going to try and figure out what the outcome is going to be. I'm just going to focus on faith in the Lord. Because if I focus on developing faith in him, then the outcomes will come when it's the right time. But right now, I don't want to worry about outcomes. I just want to worry about trying to have faith in God and becoming like him.
And I was thinking about where you were mentioning earlier that some people now are choosing the path where they are in a homosexual relationship and they still stay active in the church. And I was thinking about how, like, serving a mission and you teach people you can't baptize someone if they're or at least when I was serving mission, I don't actually know if things have changed, but that you can't baptize someone if they're in a homosexual relationship. You have to tell them like, hey, we don't do that to get baptized. But if someone is baptized before and then they come out as gay and then they get into a homosexual relationship and then they're able to stay active in the church, is it their connection with Jesus that matters? Them like they want to just connect with Jesus and be with him, even though they might never receive the blessings that all the people around them that lots of people around them are able to receive.
Yeah.
Because things might never change, right?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I have found that when people focus on like, well, I want this thing to happen, then we're just often disappointed.
Yeah.
We have to live in now, like whatever now is, like we have to live in now, whatever the policies are, whatever the teachings are, like we have to live now. That's the best way to move forward. And not like live in some imagined future day, but to live in our day right now. So there's a wide variety of experiences. But what I have found is the LGBTQ people who choose to stay active in the church have so much faith. They have faith in God, they have faith in his son, and they have faith in the restoration, and they find value in their participation in the gospel of Jesus Christ. And people who leave also have a lot of faith. It just might be packaged differently or be demonstrated differently. And I see relationship with God, and I see growth, and I see happiness and joy. And what I help my clients do is figure out, okay, what are your values, like, and how can you move forward in a value-based direction? So a lot of the LGBTQ people I know who are active in the church, they have different experiences. Sometimes their bishops are like, we are so glad you're here. Like, we want you to participate as much as you can. They find ways for them to serve, whether it be through an informal assignment or even sometimes by giving them callings. And so there's no like experience like this is what happens, but a wide variety of experiences. And I wrote an essay a few years ago. I was working at BYU, and I was asked to speak to an interfaith group of Jewish scholars and Latter-day Saint scholars about my experiences being gay in the church. And I called my essay "Feared, Pitied, and Honored," because those were the three phases I've experienced as a gay member, where people feared me, like, you are scary because you're gay, and we don't want you to talk about it. And then I was pitied, like people were like, oh, well, like this is such a hard thing you're dealing with, and I'm so sad you have to deal with this hard thing, but I really admire you for working so hard to like stay in the faith. And now I'm going to this place of where I feel honored for the unique contributions I can make. And I often say that, there are things that a single gay man can do in the church that a married straight man can't, and I'm going to do those things. Like, that's how I fit into the body of Christ.
Yeah, sweet.
And so the people who thrive are in areas where they are honored for their unique contributions, and the ones who struggle are where they're feeling feared. Like, you're like, oh no, who are these people? Like, why are they here? So if we can get to a place of like honoring people's unique circumstances and the ways that they can contribute, that's when people really thrive.
So it sounds like you've gotten to a point where you have been able to be honored for the things that you can contribute as someone in your unique position. And there are probably still many who scrutinize you, and especially because you're very active on social media and have your podcast. Like, how do you deal with all of that?
Honestly, it can be painful sometimes. It can be painful in a lot of ways, because I get comments from both sides. And the people who I have found are the most unkind to me are actually former members of the church who are LGBTQ. Oh. And I find that, and my guess is that, a lot of them, their story is, I didn't belong here, I didn't fit in, the church caused me pain, and so I then had to leave. And here I am saying, I am choosing to stay, and it works for me. And so my narrative kind of butts up against theirs. And so I think that's difficult, because they're saying this thing caused me pain. I'm saying this thing brings me joy. And that can feel really jarring and hard for people. I also find that active church members are really afraid of me. That feared, like I chose the word feared on purpose, because they see me as influencing people for ill. Like, if I say I'm gay and I'm not trying to change that then causes questions, and people wonder, and they're like, well, if I support you, am I then not supporting the brethren? And so there's a lot of fear that comes from that. So when I get negative comments, I just try and figure out, where is this person coming from? And it's usually from a place of fear or pain. And I would love to sit down and chat with that person to understand their fear, to understand their pain, so that I could either help them heal or help them understand. So understanding that people are hurt and scared helps me not take the judgment too personally. Like those comments aren't really about me. It's about them
Yeah.
and their life and their worldview. And I've been in this space long enough that I've gotten a lot of apologies, like a lot of apologies from people who, on either side or, a variety of experiences saying, I thought this about you, I said this about you, and I'm sorry. And, and I've gotten the opportunity to apologize to people too for things I thought that were incorrect.
Yeah.
And so one of my big beliefs is that when people know better, they do better. And I just want to give people the opportunity to learn and grow. And one thing I try and do to mitigate those negative comments is I do my best to talk from an I perspective. I say like, well, I've seen this and I've seen this, but also this is my experience and no one else's.
I keep thinking about how now in the past few years, especially with the experiences I have people close to me who have come out, that when I listen to General Conference specifically, I can hear things that might come across as hurtful to people in that community. And I guess my question for you is just how can we, as people who are not LGBTQ, but want to be supportive and loving and are sensitive to these things that might be hurtful, what advice do you have for us to be better?
The thing that we can do that is the most kind is to just sit with people wherever they are, like actually sit with them and what they're feeling. And too often, like we feel uncomfortable when things are uncomfortable. That sounds so reductive, but it's like if someone says, oh, this speaker said this thing in General Conference and it caused me pain, someone who loves the church, who actually might have really enjoyed that talk, might not like that feeling of incongruence. So they might then try and explain away the pain. And that helps nobody. And so we need to allow people to have different experiences than ours and just like be with them and just like trust them. The best example of this is when Lazarus died and Jesus shows up and Mary, Lazarus's sister, says like, Lord, if you'd been here, he wouldn't have died. And then she cries and Jesus knew what was going to happen. He knew he was going to raise him from the dead. And he could have said, look, Mary, don't cry. I got this. Like, I got this.
You're like, you have little faith.
Yeah. But he didn't. He wept and he cried with her and he felt her pain with her. And then he made it right.
Yeah.
And so we need to not focus on making things right. We need to not focus on fixing any problems, but focus on being with the person in their pain. And my friend Leanne, who I mentioned earlier, like she did that. Like she sat with me in my pain and cried with me. And then I knew the thing that I ended up saying the thing that I needed to hear. And more often than not, when we let people talk, when we let them express their feelings, they get to a place where they say the thing that they need to hear.
Yeah. I have learned that it is important to allow people that like silence when you ask a question or they're saying something. You don't need to be afraid of the silence. That sometimes that is very, very important.
Yep. And and like I'm 40. I'm a millennial, and lots of my closest friends are no longer participating in the church. One of my best friends, who I grew up with, is no longer active and wants nothing to do with the church. Like wishes it would just disappear and go away because he thinks it's terrible. And yet he listens to my podcast and read my book and asks me sincere questions. And I remember him saying once that when we were having dinner a few years ago, he said, I gave blessings and never felt anything. Like it was just me. I was just making it up. And then he said, have you ever felt anything giving a blessing? And then I was able to like share like some beautiful experiences I'd had, exercising the priesthood and using the power of God. And like I cried and he cried and it was like this beautiful experience. And, he didn't change his opinion.
Yeah.
I didn't change mine, but we were able to share our different experiences. And I've listened to him talk, for hours about why he left and all the things that he doesn't like about the church. And that didn't change my opinion, but it strengthened our relationship. It can be hard to do, but we need to allow people to be in very different spaces than we are, but be sincerely curious and really wanting to understand. And for our LGBTQ siblings in the gospel, that is so important because so many of us have like hidden for so long, and just feeling heard and seen is so healing for us.
Yeah. And I mean, salvation, you can't control anyone else's. Like, there's no point in saying your experience doesn't matter because I haven't seen that. It was like, cool, you haven't seen it because it's not you.
Yeah.
And I mean, people forget that all the time, but that's very important to remember.
Yep, 100%.
So why do you choose to stay active, though?
Yeah. There are a number of reasons. The first one, I think belief is just one of my spiritual gifts. You know, it says in Doctrine and Covenants, section 46, the Lord lists a number of spiritual gifts, and one of them is to know that Jesus is the Christ, and then another gift is to believe on their words.
Yeah.
And so there's like these knowers and these believers. I'm a knower. Like I just always feel like I've known. And even in the moments where I didn't want the church to be true, where I just like it was just causing me so much pain. Like I remember going onto all these like websites when I was really struggling when I was 30. I was like, I just want it all to be made up. I want it all to be fake. And I read all these things and I was like, yeah, this is made up. I don't want this to be true. And then I was like, you know what? I should read the scriptures just to make sure. And I was like reading the Book of Mormon. I was like, darn it, I really believe this. And I even when I didn't want it to be true, I just like feel the truthfulness of the restoration. And even when I didn't want the restoration to be real, I always had a testimony like God was real, that I was his child, that I was loved, and that I had a savior who had atoned for my sins, that I could go to and receive forgiveness and guidance and grace and help. And so I think like just in my core, I believe. But also I have just seen the good that like the fruit that comes from my participation in the gospel. When I was doing my master's degree in social work at BYU, I was in my early 30s. I was doing a master's degree. They had just changed the rule that single people over 30 could be temple workers, or single men over 30 could be temple workers. And I was like, I can be a temple worker now. Maybe I should do it. And I did not have time. I was way too busy.
Yeah.
And every week I would walk up to the temple and think, I need to tell them I'm quitting. Like I don't have time. And then every week I wouldn't. And I would walk out of the temple with my shoulders squared, like ready to face another week of work. And I just see that the gospel brings me so much peace and brings me so much joy. And I see the effects of the atonement in my life. And I see the beauty of the community. And all that comes with pain. Like not all the fruits are good. Some of them are rotten. But overall, it is the right place for me. And as I pray and ponder, I feel called to be here. Like I don't feel trapped. I feel called to be here. And I'll just share one quick experience. At this time I was discussing where I was like, I didn't want it to be true. I wanted it all to be fake. I decided that I was going to leave the church. I talked to my parents about what was going on in my life, and they're so understanding. And they said, if you need to leave the church and marry a man, you and he will always be part of our family. Like, and they said, we're not just on your side. We're with you 100%. Like whatever you choose, we're with you. And I was like, I'm donezo. I don't want to go anymore. And before Sunday rolled around, I had changed my mind. So I was very bad at leaving the church, but this is what happened. I decided that I was done with church, but I was going to keep reading the scriptures and praying every day. And I was just like so heartbroken. Like there was a piece inside me that felt broken. Like I was so hurt by the church. Like I felt broken on the inside. And I remember reading, I think it was 2 Nephi 10, where it talked about reconciling your will with the will of God and not with the will of the flesh or something like that. And I was like, that's interesting. There was a cross reference to Matthew 26. And so I read in Matthew 26, which is when the Savior's in the Garden of Gethsemane. And he says this prayer that we all know. He says, Father, if thou be willing, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. And I read that and I thought, Jesus didn't want to do this.
Yeah.
Like he wanted a way out. And then as I kept reading, I noticed something I'd never noticed before, which is that he gave that same prayer 2 more times. And so I thought, I want a way out. This is what I want, but what does God want for me? Mm-hmm. And so I knelt down and said the most sincere prayer I've ever said. And I said, Father, what cup are you offering me? And I felt the clearest and most annoying prompting that I was being called to move forward within the teachings of the church. And so that's what I've done ever since. And at the time, I was going to the temple every week. I was reading my scriptures every day. Like I was doing all the checklists and I was miserable, like absolutely miserable and filled with pain. And then after that experience, I kept doing all the same things. Like my behaviors didn't change, but the reason I did them changed. And it was because I was being called by God to do those things, not because I was supposed to. And that changed everything for me. And it doesn't mean I don't still feel pain. I don't still get angry. But I'm active in the church because this is where God called me to be.
You probably didn't know, but I literally almost cried during that. Like, I don't know, like I have whatever else is going in my life. Like that is exactly what I needed to hear. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're so kind.
If I talk, I'm just going to cry more. So I have to put it together.
You can cry. It's okay. Tears are just you releasing the feeling.
No, I'm okay. Like, it was the part that when you said, like, that there was, when you were choosing to leave or walk away, there was a part of you that was, like, breaking inside. And I feel like that there's been times in my life and, like, kind of recently where it's like, what do I do when there's so many people that I love and I care about that are choosing to step away or be away, and then you feel like guilty that you're still staying.
Mm-hmm.
But like every time I think like, oh, well, maybe I should just go where they are. Like there's parts of the faith that I love so much that is contradictory to what they feel.
Mm-hmm.
But I totally feel that, like, that pain when I think about not being part of it. Sorry.
I mean, you're stuck in a lot of ways. It's like you want to love people, you want to love the gospel, and people aren't always letting you do that. And it feels like you have to choose sometimes, and you're making the choice that is congruent with your beliefs, but that doesn't make it easy.
My husband and I have been in the primary for a while, like the past few years, and I feel like that is sometimes it's like that's the number one thing that gets me to church, is because you just get to teach like the simplicity of the gospel to kids that are learning about it, and you can like see that they love Jesus, and it's yeah. So, but I guess one really important question is, what do LGBTQ Latter-day Saints need?
That's a beautiful question. And I mean, the needs are varied, but this is a need I see again and again and again. So when I was at BYU, when I was a closeted student, I was the only gay student on campus, I thought. I was all alone. And then when I came out publicly when I was 30, I was living in Tucson, and there were 6 stakes there at the time. And I was the only gay Latter-day Saint I knew about in the whole city. There wasn't another openly gay person, and I was all alone. And then I thought, maybe there's other people here going through the same thing. And so I talked to my stake president, and with his help, I started a support group for LGBTQ Latter-day Saints in the area. And in the 2 years I ran it, it grew to 36 people. And those people became like family to me. And a lot of them, when they would come to the group for the first time, I would then take them to dinner or take them on a walk. And for the first time, they got to share their story with someone who got it. And like, those are sacred moments for me. And then I moved up here to Utah after getting my PhD, and I have been here the last 7 years. And there's just a need for community here too. Like, we all need community. And so I've been working really hard over the last few years to help create community. So I got together with a bunch of friends, and this last year we planned the Gather Conference, which was here in Provo last year. And it was the largest gathering of LGBTQ Latter-day Saints that had ever happened. There were 1,300 people. And our tagline is Christ-centered support for LGBTQ Latter-day Saints and those who love them. And so families came, allies came. Janice Cat Perry wrote a new hymn for the conference.
Wow.
It sounds like a primary song because she wrote like half the primary songs, but it is beautiful. It's called All Are Like Unto God. It's so great. And we just like are building this community of people who have similar experiences, of LGBTQ folks, their families, and allies who care about the community in a Christ-centered way. And we're hosting the second conference this year on September 13th and 14th, again here in Provo. And we just need each other.
Yeah.
And I host after the conference last year, a lot of people came up to me and they said, like, this was so fun. Can we do this every month? And I was like, we cannot. Like,
No.
This is too much work.
Too many resources.
Yeah, too much, too hard. But I thought, but why can't we? Like, why can't we gather every month? And so together with some people on the Gather committee, we created this program called Gatherings, which it follows the Come Follow Me reading, and just has questions that are general but kind of focused to the LGBTQ experience about the current Come Follow Me reading. And people can get together to talk about them. And the curriculum is all online. And I host one of these every month. And people come over at 7, and then at 11:30 I kick them out. Like they are so hungry to be with people with similar experiences that they would stay till 2. But I have to go to bed. But LGBTQ Latter-day Saints need each other. Like, we need each other.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you just have to be with someone who gets it. Like, where you don't have to explain yourself to someone.
True.
And like, I've talked to lots of women in the church, lots of mothers, and like, I can empathize and listen and learn and understand, but I've never been those things. Like, I can't get it. And sometimes you just need to be with someone that you don't have to explain yourself to. And for these parents of LGBTQ kiddos, I don't know why I'm getting emotional right now. they struggle so much because they feel so alone. And when they talk to a parent who's gone through the same thing or is going through the same thing, they can just be like, just hug each other and be like, I get it. Let's talk. Let's go to lunch.
Yeah.
And so this community, we need each other, and we need the Savior, and we need to build faith together. And that's what I'm trying to do.
How can any of our listeners who might want to join that Gather, how can they get connected to it?
Yeah, they can just go to gather-conference.com.
Sweet.
That's it. Just gather-conference.com, and the Gatherings curriculum is on there too.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ben.
Oh,
Thank
can I share one more thing?
Yes.
Just one thing I like to share.
From your book?
Yes.
Yes.
It's just one little paragraph. So my biggest fear in sharing my story is that people look at my life and think, well, Ben figured it out. Like all the gay people should be just like Ben.
Yeah.
And so with that fear in mind, I start the book off with this analogy of like telling someone to be like me would be like taking my glasses off. I'm wearing contacts today, but I usually wear glasses. Like taking my glasses off and putting them on someone else's face. Like we all have different prescriptions, like we all need different things. And if you gave someone my glasses, they just get blurry vision and a headache. And so with that fear still in mind, this is how I ended my book. So this is on the second to last page. I wrote, I have one parting request. If you were tempted to give this book to an LGBTQ friend or loved one, I would ask you to resist that temptation and pause for a moment. Instead of giving them my story, can you invite them to tell you theirs? And so I am just so honored that people would take the time to hear my story, my experiences today. But the truth is, like, I don't know most of the listeners, and we'll probably never talk. And that's a bummer because I'm sure they're all really cool. But every person listening to this knows an LGBTQ person, every single one, whether it's in your family, a friend, a coworker. And my story is a story that matters the least. Their stories are the ones that matter. And so pull them aside, have a conversation, say, hey, I'd love to hear your experiences. And almost everyone would be thrilled to have that conversation.
That is so important. I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. If you have any questions for Ben, write them in the comments. Can they reach you any other way?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on social media. So if you can find me on Instagram or Facebook and shoot me a message, I'm happy to chat.
Follow him. And while you're here, check out this video.